Today, we're diving into a fascinating research method that's all about the incredible power of stories, narrative analysis. We're going to unpack how the way we tell our stories can reveal just as much, if not, way more, than the events themselves.
I mean, think about it. The last time you told someone a story, you didn't just rattle off a list of facts, right? No way. You chose what to highlight, what to leave out, how to frame it. That whole creative process is exactly what we're talking about today. Okay, so let's get right into it. What exactly is this method? Well, at its core, it's all about this idea that the way we tell our stories is just as important, maybe even more important, than the actual events we're describing. All right, so here's the official definition. It's a qualitative method, which just means it deals with things you can't easily count, like interviews or essays. But the real focus, the key thing here, isn't just on the content of a story. It's on its construction, the structure, the specific words someone chose, and all the deeper meanings they've woven into their personal story.
And this is where it gets really cool. At the heart of it all is this concept called the dual layer of interpretation. So first you have the storyteller. They are already interpreting their own life just by telling the story. Then the researcher comes in and adds that second layer, analyzing how and why that person chose to build their story in that particular way.
Here's a perfect way to think about it. It's kind of like reading a personal diary or really listening to a friend talk about something they went through, but you're doing it with the rigor of a scientific method. It's this amazing blend of empathy and systematic analysis that gets us to a much, much deeper understanding of human experience.
So if you're going to analyze stories, well, you first have to collect them, right? Let's take a look at where researchers actually go to find all this raw material. And the thing is, narratives are literally everywhere. In-depth interviews are sort of the gold standard because you can let people talk freely. But researchers can also analyze things like old diaries, personal letters, social media posts, even full-blown autobiographies. Any kind of first-person account is fair game.
Now, here is an absolutely crucial detail. The transcription has to be perfect, and I mean verbatim. Every single every pause, every nervous laugh, it all gets written down because it's all considered data. You see, those aren't mistakes, they're clues. They reveal emotion and show us how the storyteller is actively shaping their story in real time.
Okay, so once we have the transcribed stories, that's when the real work begins. This is where the art of deconstructing a story comes in, so we can see how it's built and figure out what it all really means.
Generally, researchers use one of two main approaches here. First, there's the inductive or bottom-up approach. That's all about letting the story speak for itself. You just read the data and let the themes pop out organically. The other way is deductive, or top-down. That's different. You start with a theory or a framework you already have about how stories are structured, and you see how the narrative fits into it.
To make this less abstract, here's a classic example of one of those deductive frameworks. A researcher might use a model just like this to break a story down into its pieces. The abstract, which is like a summary, the orientation, which is the setting, the complicating action, which is the plot, the storyteller's own evaluation of what it meant, the resolution, and finally, the coda, which is kind of like the moral of the story. Okay, so how does this all come together in the real world? Let's walk through a simplified, step-by-step guide to see how a researcher goes from a bunch of interviews to a single, really powerful insight. Here it is, basically in 6 steps. You collect your stories, you transcribe them, then you start breaking them down, looking for common themes and interesting language, and finally, you pull it all together to construct a solid insight. Let's try it with a quick example. Imagine a student telling the story of their first day of college. The plot is simple, right? Got lost, got help. We've got 2 characters. The conflict is that feeling of anxiety, and the resolution is finding the classroom. Now, when a researcher hears tons of stories just like this one, a bigger theme starts to emerge: the universal challenge of adjusting to a new environment.
And that brings us to the big so what question. Why go to all this trouble? Why do these stories matter so much? Well, it's because they reveal things that cold, hard numbers and statistics just can't touch.
Let's look at another case study. Moving to a new city. A survey might tell us that, say, 60% of people feel lonely after they move. But a narrative tells us what that loneliness actually feels like. This story gives us that raw human emotional starting point. And then we get another story. This one shows us a turning point, a strategy. The person didn't just magically stop being lonely, they took an action. They joined a club.
And that changed everything. That's the process. So when you put dozens of these stories together, you can build what's called a core narrative. It's like a generalized story, but it's grounded in real lived experiences, and it captures a common journey. And that insight is so much richer than a simple statistic, because it doesn't just state a fact, it reveals the human process of how we adapt. So the power here is just immense. This method captures personal, lived experience in a way that nothing else can. It's used in therapy and marketing, by social movements. It helps us understand identity, culture, the whole shebang. It gives us the why and the how that numbers alone can never, ever give us. So look, if you take just one thing away today, let it be this. Narrative analysis isn't really about the events of our lives. It's about the story we tell ourselves about those events. Because that is where the real meaning is hiding. And that leaves us with a final thought. The next time you tell a story about your life, just pay attention to the choices you're making. What does the way you tell your story reveal about you? And when you really think about it, what story does your own experience truly tell?